3 days before my business partner and I were supposed to sign the deal that would have changed everything, he handed me over to the feds on a silver platter. My own father told me I deserved it. Then my family cut me off with a letter from their attorney. 8 months later, I watched from my couch as their empire got taken apart, piece by piece. And I hadn't lifted a single finger. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who posts his life on Reddit. I'm not really a share your feelings type. I'm more of a put your head down and grind kind of person. But here I am, because what happened to me was so specific, so layered, that I need to put it somewhere outside my own head before it eats me alive. Or maybe because it's finally over, and I want to remember exactly how it felt when the smoke cleared. My name's Callum. I'm 34. For most of my adult life, I've been building something, not a trust fund, not a family handout. Something I actually built with my own hands and way too many late nights. A commercial HVAC company, not glamorous I know. But in the South, in the kind of heat we get from May through October, the guy who keeps buildings cool is the guy everybody calls. I'd grown it from a two-man operation out of my truck to a company with 11 full-time employees, 2 service vans, a real office, and a contract pipeline that would have had us at just under $4 million in revenue by end of year. And then there was my business partner Royce. Royce came in as an investor 3 years ago. Mutual connection through my uncle. Royce was a couple years older than me, MBA from Vanderbilt, the kind of guy who walked into a room and immediately made everyone feel like he was doing them a favor by being there. He had capital I needed to scale. I had operational knowledge and client relationships he couldn't replicate. On paper, we made sense. 49% for him, 51% for me. I stayed majority owner because I wasn't stupid. That was the one thing I insisted on. What I didn't insist on, what I should have, was getting every single thing in writing with enough specificity that there was no gray area. We had a partnership agreement, yes. But there were gaps. Royce knew where those gaps were better than I did. My father had introduced us indirectly. His brother, my uncle Wayne, had known Royce through a real estate circle. Dad wasn't directly involved in the business, but he'd been the one who vouched for Royce when I was still on the fence. Sharp guy, my father had said. Exactly what you need to go from regional to statewide. I trusted my dad's read on people. I always had. That was mistake number 1. For the first year and a half, everything moved fast in the right direction. We landed 2 mid-size commercial accounts. Expanded our service area. I was working 60-hour weeks but they felt worth it. Royce handled the financial side. Investor relations, accounting interface, tax strategy. I ran operations, client relationships, the technical stuff. It was supposed to be a clean division. It was until it wasn't. The first thing I noticed was a vendor invoice that didn't match what I'd approved. Not by a huge amount. About $3,400. But I remember staring at it thinking, that's not right. I brought it up to Royce and he had an explanation ready, so fast it almost felt rehearsed. Billing error. He'd already flagged it with the vendor. I let it go. A few months later, I saw another one. Same thing, smooth explanation, quick resolution, no follow-up needed. The third time I noticed something, I didn't bring it up to Royce. Instead, I quietly started keeping my own parallel records. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, I just knew something was off. Over the next 4 months, I tracked vendor payments, labor hours, material costs. When I finally laid it all out in a spreadsheet at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, I felt sick. The discrepancies added up to just under $80,000 over 14 months. Not all of it was clean enough to prove, but enough of it was. Before I did anything, I called a business attorney I'd used before. A woman named Sandra who had a small practice downtown. I laid out what I had. She said I needed to be careful, document everything, and not tip Royce off before I was ready to act. She walked me through what a proper audit would look like, and what grounds I'd have for dissolving the partnership. I want you to understand how careful I was being. I didn't tell anyone. Not my employees, not my uncle, not my girlfriend at the time. Definitely not my father. I was building a case brick by brick. I had 3 more weeks before I figured I'd have enough to bring to a forensic accountant Sandra recommended. I never made it 3 weeks. On a Wednesday morning in late March, 2 men in dark suits knocked on the door of my office at 8:15 a.m. My office manager let them in. They were agents from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. They had questions about a series of financial transactions tied to my business account. And they had paperwork. I sat across from them, with my stomach dropping through the floor. While they laid out what they knew, someone had filed a confidential tip, alleging that I had been running a scheme to defraud clients by overcharging for parts and pocketing the difference, then underreporting it on our business taxes. The tip had come with documentation. Organized documentation. Spreadsheets, invoice copies, bank records. All of it framed, to make me look like the one running the operation. Royce had beaten me to the punch. He hadn't just been skimming. He'd been building a paper trail that pointed at me while he was doing it. I called Sandra from the parking lot of my own building. Hands shaking so bad I could barely unlock my phone. She told me not to say another word to the agents without her present. That call was the single best decision I made in the entire situation. That evening, I went to my parents' house because I didn't know where else to go. I told them everything. What I'd been finding, what had just happened, that I believed Royce had set me up. I expected my mother to be upset on my behalf. I expected my father to be furious. What I got instead was something I still haven't fully processed. My father sat back in his chair, looked at me with this flat, cold expression, and said, "Callum, you should have been more careful who you let run your books." That was it. That was the response. I asked if he was serious. He said he'd warned me that running a business came with risks. My mother said something about how Royce had always seemed so organized. Like that was a character reference. Like that was a defense. I sat there for a long moment waiting for one of them to say something that sounded like they were in my corner. It never came. What did come about 2 weeks later was a phone call from my father. He and my uncle Wayne had known about some of Royce's financial methods. Not the fraud, he was careful to say. Not specifically, but they'd known Royce had a creative approach to partnership accounting. They hadn't said anything because they didn't want to poison the well before the business relationship got off the ground. And now, with the IRS investigation open, they were worried about their own exposure through my uncle's connection to Royce. My father said it might be best if I handled this, without pulling the family into it. I asked him to repeat that. He did. I hung up the phone and stood in my kitchen for about 10 minutes not moving. The next few months were a particular kind of hell that I wouldn't wish on anyone. Sandra was good. She worked with a forensic accountant who helped us start untangling what Royce had actually done, versus what he'd staged to look like me. But investigations don't move fast, and in the meantime, word got out. My industry is not large. When you're under a federal investigation, even as a target who might be exonerated, people talk. 2 of my commercial accounts called to say they were pausing our contracts, out of an abundance of caution. One of my best technicians quit because he needed job security. I couldn't blame him. My father called once more during this stretch. Not to check in. To let me know that my uncle and he had officially distanced themselves from any connection to the situation, and that they'd told family members the same. He said they hoped I'd understand. He said it like he was doing me a favor. I didn't say much. I was too tired. What I didn't know, what I found out later, was that Royce had visited my parents about 2 weeks after the IRS agents showed up at my office. He'd apparently come by to apologize for the situation, and to reassure them that the investigation was focused on my conduct, not his. He'd brought documentation. My father had accepted the meeting, and that was the last time either of my parents meaningfully advocated for me. About a month after that visit, I got a certified letter. It was from my father's attorney. It laid out in formal legal language, paragraph by paragraph, that my parents were severing our financial relationship. I'd been named as a beneficiary in their estate, and I'd been listed on a family trust that handled some rental property. Both were being changed. My name was removed. They also wanted the keys back to their lake house, where I'd kept a spare set for years. The letter said they wished me well. It was signed with a law firm logo. I read it twice at my kitchen table. Then I made coffee, drank the whole pot and went to bed at 7 p.m. because I didn't know what else to do with my body. I'm not going to pretend that letter didn't hurt. It did. Not because of the money. I hadn't counted on their estate for anything. I'd built my own life. It hurt because of what it said underneath the legal language. It said, when things got hard you weren't worth the risk. It said, we picked the version of events that was easier for us. And it said it with a law firm letterhead. Like that made it more final. I didn't respond. Sandra told me not to, for legal reasons, and honestly I didn't have the words anyway. What I threw myself into instead was work. Not the business. That was in a kind of suspended animation while the investigation ground forward. But something else. I'd had a side relationship with a property management company for years, doing HVAC maintenance on their rental units. The owner, a guy named Burgess, had always liked working with me. When I explained my situation to him, he didn't flinch. He said, I know what I see when I work with someone. You're square. He started subcontracting more work my way, under my individual license, which was untouched because the investigation was targeted at the partnership entity. I wasn't rolling in it, but I was keeping the lights on. I had something to do with my hands. My core guys, the 2 or 3 employees who'd been with me from almost the beginning, they stayed. Hector had been with me 4 years. He just kept showing up. Never asked for a guarantee I couldn't give. Same with my field supervisor, a woman named Bev who'd been doing HVAC work longer than I had and didn't scare easily. Those 2, plus Burgess, were basically my whole world during that stretch. Somewhere in month 4, Sandra called me on a Tuesday afternoon and said, the forensic accountant finished the trace report. You're going to want to sit down for this. What Royce had done was more elaborate than I'd originally understood. The skimming was real. He'd been using shell vendor accounts he controlled to route payments for materials that were never ordered. But the setup he'd built to frame me was a separate layer entirely. He'd created documentation, using my digital signature on approvals I never gave. He'd backed up invoices I'd never seen. And he'd stored it all on a shared cloud drive that appeared to be mine on the metadata, but which he'd accessed and modified dozens of times from his own devices. Sandra said the forensic trace on the device access logs was the thing that cracked it. Every time Royce had edited or uploaded a document to that drive, his IP address and device ID were logged. He'd either assumed I'd never think to go that deep, or he'd gotten sloppy. Either way, there was now a clear record of him manufacturing the paper trail that was supposed to land on me. The IRS investigation pivoted, not instantly, not dramatically. The way these things turn isn't like a movie. But over the following weeks, the focus shifted. Sandra brought in a white-collar defense attorney, a sharp guy named Ken who'd worked federal cases for 20 years. And together they presented the forensic evidence. By month 7, the investigation had formally closed on me. No charges, no findings. My name was cleared on paper. And then the investigation opened on Royce. I found out the same way I suspect a lot of people find out about things like this. I was eating cereal at 6:45 in the morning, scrolling my phone, when I saw a story in the local business journal. The headline said a local investment partner had been indicted on federal charges, including wire fraud and tax evasion, tied to multiple business partnerships. His name was right there in the third paragraph. 3 separate businesses, including mine. The article mentioned that a pattern of framing partners for misconduct he had manufactured himself was central to the indictment. I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone down and finished my cereal. Later that morning, I had 17 missed calls. Most of them were from numbers I recognized: my uncle, 2 cousins, a family friend who'd been at my dad's birthday dinner 6 months ago when I wasn't invited. One was from my father. There were voicemails, a lot of them. My father's voice on the recording sounded different, thinner, somehow, like something had leaked out of it. He said he needed to speak with me. He said things had come to light. He said they owed me a conversation. I sat with my phone in my hand for a while. Then I listened to all the voicemails. Then I went and worked a half-day job with Hector and Bev at a property management contract across town. Because the work was there, and I wasn't about to let it go unfinished. That evening, there was a knock at my door. I looked through the window before I opened it. My father and my Uncle Wayne were standing on my porch. My father looked like he hadn't slept. He was wearing a collared shirt, which meant he'd dressed for this, and he still looked wrecked. My uncle was a step behind him, hands in his pockets, not quite meeting the light. I opened the door but didn't move out of the way. "Callum," my father said. "Please." I let them in because I'm not the kind of person who turns people away from their own answers. We stood in my living room. I didn't invite them to sit, and my father started talking. He said they'd learned more about what Royce had done. He said they understood now that I'd been telling the truth from the beginning. He said he was sorry. The word came out like it cost him something. I looked at him for a long time before I spoke. "You got a letter from Royce after I came to you?" I said. "You met with him. You took his paperwork." My father didn't deny it. "And then you sent me papers from an attorney removing me from the estate." I said, "While I was under a federal investigation for something I didn't do. While I was barely keeping my company alive. You did that." He said, "I know." I said I needed one person in my corner during that. One. That was the moment where it mattered. "And you picked the version of the story that was easier for you." My uncle started to say something about how they hadn't had all the facts. I held up my hand and he stopped. "I'm not interested in the explanation," I said. "I believe you're sorry. I believe you see it now. But being sorry after the investigation cleared my name isn't the same as standing with me when it cost something." I stepped back toward the door and held it open. "I think we're done here for tonight." They left. My father turned at the bottom of the steps and looked back at me like he might say something else. He didn't. I shut the door. I didn't feel like I'd won something. I felt emptied out in a way I hadn't expected. Like I'd been holding a structure in place by sheer tension for 8 months, and now I could finally let it go. But letting it go didn't feel like the relief yet. Just release. The week after Royce's indictment hit the press, things moved fast in the way they never had during the slow months. The 2 commercial accounts that had paused our contracts called back. One of them apologized directly, which I appreciated, and which I will remember. Burgess quietly started funneling more work my way. Not because he needed to, but because he's the kind of person who rewards loyalty in both directions. My attorney helped me file civil claims against Royce for damages, which is a separate process and a long road. But the paperwork is in. The business is not what it was. I won't dress that up. We lost momentum and clients and one really good technician I haven't been able to replace. But we're still here. I'm still here. Last month I won a bid on a mid-sized office complex downtown. 4 floors, full HVAC maintenance contract 2-year term. Hector and Bev celebrated with me in the parking lot outside the office. Bev brought a sheet cake from the grocery store that said "Grats" in blue icing, clearly intended for something else. We ate it off paper plates and didn't care. Royce's case is still working through the federal system. That process takes time. But the Business Journal has been covering it steadily. From what I've read, 2 of the other partners he victimized are also cooperating with the prosecution, which makes the case significantly stronger. His attorney released a statement that was the legal equivalent of saying nothing. There are people in my industry who'd done business with Royce, or referred him to contacts I've watched, over the past several months, as that network has quietly evaporated. My father called again, 3 weeks after I turned him and the uncle away at the door. He said he and my mother wanted to try to repair things. He said they knew they'd failed me. He said he'd been thinking about it every day. I listened to the whole message. I listened to it twice actually, standing in my kitchen in the morning, in the same spot where I'd stood frozen after he told me to handle things, without pulling the family into it. I haven't called back yet. I don't know if I will. That's an honest answer. Not a dramatic one. I'm not punishing him. I'm not planning a confrontation. I'm just not in a hurry to walk back into a dynamic where, when things get hard, I find out how much I actually matter. There are people in my life right now who showed me who they were during the hard part. Burgess. Hector. Bev. My friend Marcus, not the Marcus from any other story, just my friend Marcus who called me every week during the investigation and never once told me to look on the bright side. Those people don't need me to forgive anyone to earn their place. They already earned it. I'm seeing someone now. Her name is Gwen. She's a landscape architect, which is as far from commercial HVAC as you can get. And she thinks it's funny that I know exactly how every building we walk into is kept at the temperature it's at. She asked me once, early on, whether I thought I could ever trust a business partner again after what Royce did. I thought about it for a while before I answered. I said I think the mistake wasn't trusting Royce. The mistake was trusting the story other people told me about Royce, instead of the one my own records were showing me. And I think the same thing applies to people generally. The test isn't what someone says when everything is fine. It's what they do when it costs them something to be in your corner. She said that was a good answer. I told her I'd had about 8 months of very quiet nights to work it out. The engagement ring I'd been planning to buy before everything fell apart. I'd been pricing them for 3 months, before the IRS knocked on my door, because I'd been thinking of proposing to my girlfriend at the time. She left about 6 weeks into the investigation. Said it was too much right now. I didn't argue. I wasn't surprised, honestly. Some exits tell you what you needed to know. I'm glad she made it clear when she did. The ring fund is still sitting in a savings account. I haven't touched it. I don't think of it as wasted money. I think of it as money I'm saving for someone who stays. I posted this because somebody else is probably sitting in a parking lot right now with their hands shaking, staring at a situation that looks like the end of everything they built. And what I want to say to that person is, the ending hasn't been written yet. The version of the story that other people are telling about you right now is not the final version. Keep your records. Get a good attorney. Let the people who show up actually show up, and let the ones who choose convenience over loyalty show you that too. That information is also useful. The office complex downtown starts in 3 weeks. Hector's already running the logistics. Bev ordered new shirts for the crew with the company name on them. First time we've had branded gear in almost a year. I put one on this morning and looked in the mirror for a second longer than I needed to. It fits.